Welcome to the Sexual Life Podcast. It is now, let's find the date. It is April 26, 2017. We're on a men's development excellence call and a lot of good stuff we're talking about God, man, well, this now we're talking about rapport and the different evolutions of it and those types of things. But here's the deal, guys. The Sexual Life Podcast is made for you to answer literally any question that you have about sex, connection, rapport, dating, meeting women, starting a conversation, being in a relationship, because that's what we have been talking about literally since 2009, since TSL Online started, which was the original course where we started building communities with calls and so on. Of course, I've been teaching for 10 or 11 years with all of this sort of dating and seduction stuff, and as well as other forms of men's development. But that's what this is for. And on this call, there are literally 16 people here, all from around the world. And we've just been talking about a lot of cool stuff. In any case, so what we're getting into here is we're getting into rapport and the different evolutions that we had about it in the whole seduction industry. So way back when, and I believe 2007, there was a course that Mystery Method put out called Breakthrough Comfort. And it was like this kind of manipulative act of how you could hack love. And it came up with all these little tricks and stuff and whatever. And somebody was asking about these different techniques and did they really work? And they even emailed me a list of the different techniques. And I used to help with teaching this, but I just think such an interesting thing. So, and let's get to this because this is really the crux of rapport. And we'll tell you different ways of how to get to rapport in a very ethical way. But as this was sold back in like, I think 2006 and 2007, was that you didn't need to worry about having somebody fall in love with you because now you had tools to force somebody to fall in love with you. Just imagine how crazy that sounds, how crazy that is, and what kind of an insane sort of community did we have to be in, or culture did we have to create so that so many people reached for that and saw that as the answer to their love and their sex life. Because guess what happens when you force somebody to fall in love with you when you aren't really the right match, and the equation of love actually piecing together, through the way that it always worked throughout the form of, humanity and culture was much different and took experience. When you bypassed all of that, excuse me, what happened? You weren't prepared. Your whole life was like a fraud and a front and bullshit. And so it was just such a terrible, terrible like way of voicing things. But all these things back then to me were so fascinating. And even back then I was writing what was known as the Red Stack, which was the first customized, stack and material and whatnot. It became very popular. People tried to copy it, blah, 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 blah. You get it. It's good. It's good. Still do it. If you got $10,000, call me. But other than that, no. So let's talk about some of this stuff, because we were talking about the different things that we did or that we talked about in Breakthrough Comfort, but let's see how they work in a normal conversation and the actual functionings of what allows a person to connect with you. Because if we understand that, then we can adapt it to what our real life is. And that's the most important thing. Just imagine how beneficial that is. If you could take literally, and I'll, hopefully if you allow me, I'll prove this to you if you give it enough time. But if you're just watching these videos, please try it because it will work. We can make it work. Sometimes it might take some coaching, but if you have the fortitude, you could probably get this to work for yourself, where you could take anything in your life and build a connection with it. So a lot of these things that we saw in just the age-old seduction stuff were things like there was something called the golden mirror, where you saw this beautiful side of her that nobody else saw, and you had to prove that to her. Another one might be destiny. Now, there's another term that I would use in old school pickup days about destiny, which was like, man, it was so important to meet you. But it literally kind of means that whole destiny thing that, the stars had aligned and I can't explain why this is happening, why I feel this with you, but it has to be something bigger that can't be explained. This vague, obscure thing, this godlike feeling that pumps through us that we call love, that I just can't, that certain je ne sais quoi that I can't put my finger on is happening now with us. It must be destiny. And so there's all these different things that push that. There's also conspiracy, like telling secrets. And man, I'm going to tell you something personally that nobody else can understand about me, and that nobody else can or about you that nobody else can understand, and so on. There's all these different things that come into play with how, I guess you could say, this rapport and connection work. Okay. But how do we make this in an ethical way? How can we do these things with, without basically lying to somebody, without trying to force somebody to feel something when really what we're saying is a lie? And think about this. This is so amazing to me. Rather than be yourself and have faith in that, we chose that it was better to lie and use a technique to show who we are. That is just so fucking crazy. So to get something that we really wanted, to get something that we'd value, we were going to find that the better road was to lie and deceive and whatever to get the result. And then finally we'd be happy. Even though, religions and philosophies and pretty much any ethical model of life said that this was not going to work. In any case, I just find that's fucking unreal. That's unreal. Okay. So when we look at this stuff like the golden mirror, right? The golden mirror is just this stupid name that they came up with, and we still come up with stupid names to name things because it sounds fun and whatever. But was this thing where we would elicit a value of that person or find out something important of that person, and we'd say, man, I see something in you that nobody else sees. It's amazing. And so really what's being said there, and the thing is, that did work to some degree to get people to connect with us. All right. The reason why it would only work to some degree is because when you're not being yourself and you're lying about it, there's something off with it. Like we can't fake being human that much. It's just, it does not gel, So the thing is that when we realize that dynamic which is very simple, it's like, oh my God, well, we found something very real and important about this person. And then we say that we see it. And a lot of people don't see it. And then aside from just seeing it, we say it means something to us. That's a very simple process. Okay. So if we had an ability to pull something real out of that person, and maybe in tandem of pulling that real thing out of that person, we were also being our real self and showing how important that was, or maybe how excited we were because we were really excited. Then we could very easily get to that second part of saying like, wow, oh my God, I see this. I totally get this side of you. Man, I get it. And I like it. Okay. And you can see how naturally, easily this would happen. And then I could say, it means something to me. Holy shit. This means something. This defines a part of me. So of course we could sit there and say, okay, I get the dynamic, but how do we honestly talk about it? I would only know how to talk about this, Steve, if somebody gave me a template to follow. Okay. So there's a couple of easy things that we could do to make a template for this. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to actually look at what is it that we value? What is it that we really care and like about somebody? What are those things? What are those things excite us about and so on and blah, 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 blah. But what's interesting is that if we do like the identity workbook at TSL, we'll very easily find these things out, right? The identity workbook will say like, what's your self-perception? What's your social perception? What are you attracted to? What are your desires? What are your wants? What are you attracted to mentally, emotionally, physically, your purpose of your actions and your purpose of what's in your mind and all this sort of stuff. But see, the thing is that rarely do we think about that, and rarely do we think that's good enough. That's how fucked up this is. Rarely do we think that is good enough to actually, work to make somebody like us. What a terrible thing. So it's better just to lie and come up with this process and, do this whole like sociopathic, vibe to it. So let's just start here with eliciting that thing. Guess how we're going to get excited about eliciting that thing? Well, we start with what we value. What do we value in other people? So for me, I generally talk about 4 or 5 things, probably a little bit different now because I've been in a relationship and a lot of those things kind of amaze me, but that would be sex. And so with sex, it's usually the man and the woman dynamic, how sex works, what people's sexual identities are, how they found their sexuality and so on, those types of things. So sex is a big thing. Their passions. So what they love to do. Now, these are things that I like. Yours could be very different, which is why you need to explore yourself. Don't just go for what works. Because if you only go for what works, that's the surest way to make it not work. Okay, so we want to go for what works in tandem with finding out stuff about ourselves. So, this passions, what people love, what people enjoy, what they live for. Yeah, everybody has that. Everybody has that whether they do it or not. They think about that. Okay. Then another one might be relationships. Okay, so the third thing for me right now, especially, would be relationships, because there's so much I could talk about it. There's a time where you're in love. There's a time when you're having sex. There's a time that's the honeymoon. Then there's a time where you like nudge them and you're like, hey, you want to do this or whatever. There's a time where you're pissed off at each other. Relationships are amazing, and people will talk about it like crazy. And also, I've thought about this a lot and I have so much experience with it personally, but also with working with others on it. So I love talking about the different, ideas about relationships. Okay. I like it. It's great. I love it. Right. Another thing that I might talk about are what people think are their negative qualities. So with those first three, everybody's like, okay, Steve did this social dynamic thing where he's talking about only what's popular to people. No, man, I'll talk about self-hate. I will talk about how you hate yourself. I will talk about like all this sort of stuff, right? I'll talk about all the negatives. I'll talk about being a drug addict. I'll talk about, different sexual trauma that I've gone through, seen, witnessed, been a part of. I'll go through periods of extreme loneliness because these are things that I'm truly interested in. This is a huge part of my life. A huge part of my life and all the greatest lessons actually came from that stuff. So I'll talk about it. And I don't need to even talk about it in a cliche way. I just need to be okay with it. So I don't need to say like, I had to break my wings to learn how to fly. I could actually say, no, man, I broke my wings and it caused me a tremendous amount of pain. But man, like I am okay with that. And it means something to me. Why is everybody so afraid of it? Like I could get back to that human experience of it. So if I know that me part of things, if I know that, and I get that, now I can start thinking like, how can I elicit that from somebody? All right. So remember, we're trying to elicit a real thing from somebody to show interest, to care about it and show that we understand it, to then move to, man, this means something to me. This means something to me. This is amazing. All right. So very simply, I could start asking questions. So these are all very easy questions. And if we explore ourselves and if we actually try this, we're going to notice that we get specific answers back from the general public as well. So I can start asking questions like, man, what are you passionate about? Here's what I know from asking that question. All right. And I only need to ask about 10 or so people to realize that if I ask that question, I'm going to get, some typical answers. What are you passionate about? They might say family, God. They might say, I love art. I love music. They might say these things that they kind of do, but they don't really do in life. That's another thing that I get from discussing these things with people, as well as me doing my identity workbook. If you see a recurring theme here, it might be that you should do the TSL online identity workbook. I've put it out there for free. You should look at it. It will give you a wealth of things to talk about. They generally say things that are things that they want to do, but they haven't really done. Okay. Now you can see that as a tool of manipulation, or you could see that, man, it's pretty obvious that a lot of people know what they want to do, but they haven't had the time to do it. Okay. I can understand that because all I need to do in order to give it value is to understand it, to show that I see that, to show that I understand it, to show that I could be on their team, to show that I get it. It doesn't mean that I need to exploit it more and say, oh, well, let me show you your pain points or whatever other shit. I need to show that I can uniquely and individually hear them. That's a really beautiful thing. This is our born to be qualities. These are the things that like we don't have to work at to get. This is a human quality that is a part of our biology, right? That sort of empathy, right? But let's say I wanted to talk about sex. You can't talk about sex in public. Well, hang out with me, motherfucker, because you can. So I'll just say like, yep. In fact, if I want to pussyfoot around it, usually I kind of like to shock people, but if I'm going to pussyfoot around it, if you want something that you could do right now, I could say like, man, I got a question. It has to do with relationships and, I don't know how to put this. Maybe I shouldn't ask you this. And like, are you from here or how old are you? Okay, I'm going to ask you anyway. So I give a little bait beforehand to get them intrigued. And I say, well, it has to do with sex. And I don't mean it in a bad way or whatever, but how did you know who you were sexually? They're confused as fuck. They don't really know. But again, I know I've asked this so many times that I know they're going to be confused about that, which is fine because it gives me the opportunity to then explain it very simply in a maybe 2 to 3 sentence explanation of going, like, how did you understand yourself sexually or who you were sexually? And they're like, and I'd say, well, it doesn't mean anything crazy, but like, what you liked in rather than what you reacted to. So rather than picking a random guy, like what actually was good for you and what you liked. How did you, and people will get that. They'll understand it, right? It's pretty easy. All right. It's pretty easy. Now, I also know they're going to then start with this story because it's a tough question. People haven't thought about this. It's not because people are lying to you or trying to deceive you. It's that they're going to say things like, well, man, my last boyfriend, they may tell a story of where it didn't work or this person lied. So I'm only going to go with a guy like this. And they're going to list off some checklist qualities that they probably don't get or have experienced, you know, or they're going to say like, man, I really do know what I want, because they're not going to want to admit their weakness to a friend or some stranger. They're going to say, no, man, well, I get this, that, this, and that, da, 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 da. And then that gives me the opportunity to find out more about that. I could even challenge them on it, so it's super easy. I kind of know where these things are going to go. God, man, so many people, it's like, you want results, and those are great. Results are great. They motivate us to go further. They give us a flag that we can plan on. But when you're not getting those results and the chasing of getting those results, when you're that journey, you're finding out so much information that just makes you fly through social dynamics, and people just negate that. They get all pissed off about it. Man, it's the best. It's the best. If somebody throws you a curveball and gets angry at you or something, it's awesome. In any case, let's say I want to talk about negatives. I just talked to a random stranger and I'm saying like, man, well, okay, this is a question. It's kind of tough to ask or whatever. But like, have you ever gone through a time in your life where you doubted everything? Like everything that gives you meaning to you now, you're like, I doubt it. I know you probably don't want to answer that to some random person, but have you ever felt that? Okay. So here's the best part about all of this. I just went to go elicit something. I'm going to do a cool trick here, right? Rather than elicit something from them, I'm now going to share me. And here's the cool phenomenon. You probably won't believe this will happen, but it totally, totally does, right? I'm going to share my definition of that. And hopefully it won't be fake, and it'll be really me. And by default, they'll feel like they elicited something. It's a cool thing. Now, if you don't believe that's possible, if I go like, man, so what do you really want? You right now, watching this video, wherever you're watching it on Facebook, you're watching it on YouTube, you're listening to it on whatever podcast, da, 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 da. Like, what do you want? What do you want? Think about it now. Like, what do you want? Okay. And I know it's hard to articulate. It's a difficult thing to, I mean, you could say like, oh man, I want $1,000 or whatever, but really, those are the things that, I don't know. What do you really want? And so when I think about that, if I can calm myself down for a second, I really want to have a good family. I want, love. And even those, that might even be a little bit superficial. I should really think about this. Like, I really want just to be okay. Just to be okay. Just to feel good and to feel that I'm doing the right thing. Man, wherever I'm at, like if I could feel that in whatever situation, that's it. That's kind of it. It's a little bit of a journey of the mind that I got to go through for that. But like, so that being said, I mean, like, what do you want? What do you want? And so the trick of all of that is that when I show my real self and when I really go through that process and I'm not afraid to show it in front of you, you kind of walk through that process on me, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to understand and articulate the question, whether or not you answer it. So we get to that second point there. All right. So if I can start asking questions about those things that I like, whether that's sex or, a shitty time in your life or your relationships or your passions or whatever it is, right? The man-woman dynamic. If I'm willing to share about myself, then the cool thing is, and I can have them listen to me and I'm really being me, with passable social dynamics, with passable presentation. And you might be going, but there's not enough attraction material in that, Steve. Okay, whatever. You don't need, if you have isolation, you're good. Your attraction material is there to get isolation. All right. If you're one of those guys that's really into pickup. But anyway, the thing is that, man, the greatest thing is that if I can show I understand it, it now starts to give value. Okay. Now it's not enough of that value. It's not enough there to actually say it means something to me yet, because they haven't given me enough. All right. But check this out. If this golden mirror technique is so based off of me getting something from them, okay, that now I can say gives meaning to me, like you made my night, or now I believe in God because you just told me this, or this was amazing, it changed my life. If I do that, it builds a connection. What if I did it in reverse? All right, so in order to elicit something, I asked some questions. I then told my story about it. And now, what if I actually, instead of taking that thing over here, the golden mirror, so to speak, of saying like this meant something to me, I could say, what if I got them to say what I said meant something to them? Whoa. All right. Now I know this sounds like a lot of crazy shit going on, but it's really, really simple. And it would be in like, so let's think of some ways. How could we get that? How could we get it? Because if you could just tell me the template, Steve, if you could just give me the technique to make it work, cool. Well, how would you say that if you were just being yourself? And then let's start there and let's clean it up. If I was just being myself, which doesn't always work in society, we totally get that. That doesn't, you're yourself, people shit on you, right? That's where you got, or that's how you got to where you are. You're just being yourself. End up alone in a corner, with some porno mags or some internet porn and whatever, and a bunch of self-hate, and you're just raging it out all night. Okay. So, but if I were just being myself and I shared, let's say about, some shitty times in my life, I might say, you know what? The fact that you heard me, that means something. And the fact that you heard me and you're not judging me, means something. That's cool. That's really cool. Maybe I might say that. But you can't say that to anybody in public, just when you meet them. But what if you could? So this is the most bare bones stupid way, I say like, man, what are your passions? What are you really passionate about? I want to know. They kind of say something, you give me that typical answer of like something that they really like, but they probably haven't invested much time in, or maybe they invest a ton of time in it, but they're not totally, it's not gelling for it. It's not working for them yet. And so we say, man, you know what it is like with passions for me. Now I'm just going to walk them down my story. And I want to keep my story to about 15 seconds, maybe 3 lines, maybe 5 lines, but 15 seconds. I want to keep it short because the longer I make my story, the less the story can be about them, if that makes sense. The less I can get that elicitation from me sharing me. So I could say something like, man, like passion for me was so crazy because when I was a kid, I wanted to be a musician, but like a rock star type musician. And then I got really into theater and photography. And then I got so into art, it was just crazy. And then all of a sudden I become this like dating coach and sex coach and all this stuff. And it is just nuts, but it's the same thread running all through that of those very different topics. And man, so let's pause there. What if I wanted to then do the reverse of that golden mirror thing or whatever we want to call it, of that meant something? I could then say, man, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, has that ever happened to you where you it's like whatever you wanted when you were 5 years old is like the somehow attached to what you live for now. God, like the fact that you get that's awesome. I feel like you know me. That's beautiful. That would be how I would do it. Man, do you really understand that? It's a very simple concept. Okay, this is a very, very simple concept. I'm not blowing smoke up anybody's ass. There's a bunch of cold reads that could derive from that, but this is really it. And it's really it because I've studied a social dynamic based off of myself and taught it, thousands of times over. But that's all I would have to do to get that reverse golden mirror effect or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Basically seeing that somebody got me and it might make them feel good. Guess what's super easy now? I could now ask them more about their passions or whatever the fuck else. And I guarantee you I could get it from them. Let's say I wanted to talk about sex. I could say, man, this is weird, but it's a question about relationships and it has to do with sex. But how did you ever get to the point where you learned that the things you liked about sex actually hurt you? And they're like, what the fuck why are you asking me this? This is like too crazy. So I've asked that a lot, and I kind of know the answers I get. Well, first off, the first thing is they put up a wall. But the second thing is they usually have a total misinterpretation of those things. They think it's like, they think that they're wanting or the desire of sex or whatever it is they're chasing or pursuit of sex needs to be controlled. All right, so I generally get that kind of an answer from it. And again, you know how to find out the answers about, or the typical answers about the things that you really care about? Ask people. Ask like 10. You'll get it. You'll get it. It's there. It's the map. It's great. It's fucking awesome. So people then, she says whatever. She's confused about it. Doesn't want to answer. And I say, I'll just go ahead and say it. I'll say, most people think it's like this behavior, like their pursuit of wanting to be sexual or like hooking up with somebody, or they say they have a bad picker or whatever it is. And that's the reason why they have the bad relationships, when I think it's more than that. I think like for me personally, it was a lot of, it was like unresolved shit within me. Like I would be falling in passionate love with people, like in so many different ways. And at a certain point in my life, I got really good at it. but there were a whole bunch of baggage that I brought into the bed with me. It was crazy. We'd close the covers, we'd be kissing passionately, but there was all this whatever belief going through me that kind of messed it up. And it always allowed me to get the same person. That's kind of a long ground, or, it's a lot longer than 10 to 15 seconds there, but I'm good at this. But anyway, part of the key of that is like that they can really understand this. So now I could say, I know it's really personal, but have you ever felt that what didn't make your relationship work was stuff that was really related to you, like a guy left you, or maybe he cheated on you, but there was a part of you that hurt more because you always knew it was going to happen. Okay, there you go. So I'm trying to get that understanding, well, getting them to understand me, right? So then they say yes or no. Let's say they say no, that's never happened. It's like, oh shit, oh fuck. No, you're not fucked. Because you tried to attempt to see a real deep side of them. You tried to really see a deep side of them, and you took a guess, and you were wrong. So whether you're right or wrong, you've now shown that you've looked for a deep side of them. And it meant something to you. We're a huge part in this equation. So let's say you're wrong. You say, well, then what is it? What makes your relationships work? You might have to dig a little bit deeper here, but as long as they can say what they think made their relationships work, Jesus Christ, man, all you have to do then is take it back here and show that golden mirror thing, which is basically what you're going to state intent towards. All right. So in social dynamics, there's social behavior, and that's all your attraction, that's your rapport, that's all the stuff. And really it's rapport. Social is trying to get to the constant of rapport. Attraction stuff or fun stuff or whatever is just these little spikes that go into this constant of rapport. When it turns into sexual, that's dependent upon intent, and intent being exchanged. So it's shown or seen or said, but usually shown in a nonverbal way. You can go to thesexuallife.com/126 and you can download all these like crazy tutorials on showing sex without saying a word. All right. So it's basically where that intent gets exchanged. I like you, but not just I like you. She's also got to show that she likes me. And then we're moving from social to sexual. That's going to be a key part of it. So the thing is that if I say like, man, what was that? Like, so what was it? Was there a part of you that thought it was that you always doubted that about yourself, and then it happened? And then she's like, oh my God, how do you, most people will say yes to that if you really have them in a rapport. If they're holding up a wall, they'll say no to protect themselves. And they say, so how do you see relationships? So they kind of tell you might need to dig a little bit more. And then let's say they say, God, man, it's just like, I wish it could be this and that. I was, well, do you get that? Why don't you get that? And now they've started to show a little bit of us, and guess what? Boom. We now show what that means to us. We go, man, you know what? I don't fully understand everything that you said, but it means so much to me. Like I feel like I saw the real you for a moment and I liked it. Man, I don't know. I don't usually say this to people, or maybe you do, or whatever the fuck it is, right? But then you say like, I would like to see the real you. Like, man, you got like 30 minutes later in the week. I guarantee you'll have a good time. And then you get a date. All right. And what do we say if you haven't watched it? What do we say in Formula 69? In fact, you have to be a member to access Formula 69, but it's a really good 9-part video series. But we say, if I can meet somebody, most likely I can get rapport. If I can get rapport, most likely I can get a date. If I can get a date, most likely I can get a kiss. And if I can get a kiss, I can get laid. All right. In the percentages of those things, the further you go down the line, the higher they go. And it depends on your skill set and whatnot, but it's a pretty easy thing, man. Rapport is so simple. And so when we talk about these little techniques that people did, when they did it, it's like the technique is more powerful and it's better to be something other than yourself. Man, bullshit. They were all designed off of people for thousands of years, and then like, pseudo scientist pickup artists researching them and seeing them how they would work manipulatively because they didn't want to be themselves. But these things worked while being ourselves, and we're really dependent, and worked better while being ourselves, because there's something about human communication and connection and the spindle cells in our brain and all that social intelligence where we read other people, that when you're not faking it, people take it a lot more seriously. So I don't understand why there aren't more people learning and teaching and exercising a social dynamic that is based off of you. That being said, TSL podcast, guys, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, share it with your friends, all that sort of stuff, or on YouTube. If you want to watch these videos, you can click the links down below. And every month, this one will probably be posted in April of 2017. But in that case, we have our Getting Sexual Over Text Messaging Guide. You should download it. But next month in May, we'll switch that up to a different quick guide. We have a ton of them, and they were all designed off of questions that people asked and they got an answer for. And then even better, most of these quick guides were written like 3 years ago. So they've been tested and like people have made them work, and then they've been re-edited and improved and all this sort of stuff. So it's great stuff, and they take about 15 minutes to read. So you should definitely download those, and then you'll get on an email list where we'll spam you incessantly. Basically, we'll share a bunch of this content that we put out, and then when we have a new product, we'll tell you about it. It's pretty simple. All right. So cool. Thank you so much for being a part of this. You guys know I love what I do, and it's badass. Wednesday night, we're early on in the call. It's only 10:30, and I bet you we're going to go till probably about like 1 a.m. tonight, and then I'm going to get some bad food, and it's going to make me sleep bad and be fucked up. Anyway, talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for watching.